Welcome back to Echoes of America. When we think of war, we think of conquest, destruction, bloodshed. But in ancient America, warfare could also be a ritual, a ceremony, a performance that honored the ancestors, tested the spirit, and maintained the balance of the cosmos. Across the continent, indigenous cultures engaged in symbolic warfare, duels of honor, contests of strength, and sacred battles where the outcome wasn't just about victory, but about maintaining cosmic order. This is the story of ritual combat in ancient America, the untold traditions of symbolic war. Warfare in ancient America wasn't always about territory or extermination. It could be ceremonial, symbolic. Some battles were scheduled during festivals, others followed sacred rules. Warriors painted their bodies, invoked spirits, and engaged in combat not to destroy, but to honor tradition. These weren't mock battles. They were real, with real danger. But the goal wasn't annihilation. It was to create balance, test bravery, and fulfill a cosmic narrative. The Mexica, or Aztecs, practiced what they called Xochiaoyotl, the Flower War. These ritualized battles were arranged in advance between rival city-states. Warriors trained for years to take part. The goal wasn't to kill the enemy, but to capture them. Captives were then honored in religious ceremonies, often sacrificed. The battle was a sacred contract, a reenactment of divine conflict. It was theater and blood, faith and war, entwined into a single ritual. In the Mississippian world, especially around the Etowah and Spiro mounds, warrior iconography is everywhere. Shell carvings show single combat between elite warriors, armed with maces, axes, and shields. These may represent ritual duels, contests of power, not massacres. Some were likely witnessed by entire communities. Their outcomes determined prestige, succession, or religious legitimacy. Warfare wasn't just between nations. It was sometimes between champions. Among southeastern tribes like the Creek, Cherokee, and Choctaw, the green corn ceremony included not just renewal and forgiveness, but sometimes ritual combat. Old rivalries could be resolved in symbolic confrontations, wrestling matches, stickball games, or ritualized skirmishes. These were not casual games, they were intense, sometimes bloody, but within limits, a sacred outlet for aggression, a spiritual reset for the year. The fight was part of the healing. Stickball, known by names like Anetza or lacrosse, was more than a game. It was war without war. Played across woodlands, plains, and southern tribes, it often settled intertribal disputes. Games could last for days. Hundreds of players. Few rules. Injuries and even deaths were not uncommon. But the outcome was binding. It was a way to avoid blood feuds while still preserving honor. A spiritual alternative to open warfare, where athleticism replaced the blade. Across the continent, warriors followed sacred codes. They painted their bodies not just for intimidation, but as spiritual armor. Certain colors, symbols, and feathers conveyed intention. Some warriors vowed not to kill, others only fought specific rivals. Taking a captive was often more honorable than killing. And in some tribes, the first warrior to strike the enemy without killing was the most celebrated. Even in battle, the spirit was watched. The line between warrior and ritualist blurred. Among the Plains tribes, Lakota, Crow, Cheyenne, true bravery wasn't always measured in blood. It was measured in risk. The highest honor in battle was not to kill, but to touch your enemy and escape unharmed. This sacred act was called counting coup. Warriors rode into danger with no intention to slay, only to prove their courage and skill. They carried coup sticks instead of weapons. The more daring the act, the greater the honor. A feather wasn't just decoration, it was a record of sacred war. Counting coup turned the battlefield into a spiritual test, where restraint was as revered as power. Before any battle, symbolic or real, many indigenous tribes performed the war dance. These were not simply expressions of emotion, they were acts of invocation. Through dance, warriors entered trance states, called upon ancestors, and prepared themselves spiritually for combat. In some cultures, the dance determined who would lead the charge. In others, it allowed warriors to release fear. The dance was communication with the spirits, the earth, and one another. Painted faces, rattles, drums, and synchronized movement turned the body into a ritual instrument. Warfare began not with blood, but with rhythm and invocation. To fight with honor was not just a code, it was a cosmic duty. Across ancient America, war was more than a contest of blood. It was a dance, a sacrifice, a story played out on sacred ground. Whether in duels beneath mounds, on fields of stickball, or in the fires of the Flower War, ritual combat shaped society, law, and identity. Today, those echoes remain in ceremony, in sport, and in the values passed down through generations. This was symbolic warfare, and this was the code of the ancestors. Subscribe for more untold truths, only on Echoes of America.